People assume nights like this begin with thunder. They don't. They begin with the small sound that lives inside your skull, the quick hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the breath before impact, the sound that took my daughter from me and never left. Tonight I decided it would be the last sound I heard. I folded her little blanket, set it on the table like a flag finally lowered, and turned off every light in the house. Then someone knocked. 3 measured strikes, calm as a metronome. I froze with her photograph in my hand. The porch light, triggered by rain, flickered on. Through the peephole, I saw a hooded figure, shoulders shaking, breath fogging the glass. The house seemed to lean with me as I opened the door. "You don't know me," he said, voice frayed by cold. "Please, I need help." The night carried a smell of gasoline and hospital sanitizer. He was soaked, rain sliding off him in straight lines as if the storm itself respected his urgency. He held out a folded photograph. A little girl looked up from a sunny afternoon, crooked ribbon, one dimple, tooth just deciding which way to grow. It hit with the accuracy of a sniper, the same cheek my daughter used to lean into my palm. "She's in surgery," he said. "They need a donor. I'm trying every house on this street. Please." I should have closed the door. I should have said what the world once said to me. No? But the panic in his eyes pulled at me like a tide. He kept talking as he stepped inside, words spilling like coins he couldn't afford to spend. "Her blood type is rare." The storm knocked out lines. The hospital told me to try nearby homes. There might be a match. "What's her type?" I asked. He told me. The letters and plus sign landed like a nail tapped into wood. It was mine. An ambulance moaned far off. I could have lied, said I wasn't a match, that I didn't drive at night. Instead, I reached for my keys, the ones I had promised not to need after tonight. They slid into my palm with the weight of a verdict. "I'll take you," I said. He exhaled as if his ribcage had been unbuckled. As we moved toward the door, his sleeve brushed the frame, and the porch light caught a slim white seam from jaw to ear, a neat, healed line. It meant nothing then, just a detail my eyes filed away. The mind is an archivist. It stores what the heart can't read. We hurried through rain that turned the street into a river pretending to be asphalt. He kept the photo pressed to his chest, as if paper could share heat. At the car, his hand shook so hard he missed the handle twice. I opened it from inside. He asked if I knew the fastest route to St. Helena General. I did. Grief makes you fluent in hospitals. Wipers chewed at the storm while we drove. He spoke in short bursts, surfacing between waves. His daughter's name, the way she hums while brushing her teeth, the science project about butterflies waiting on the kitchen table, wings cut from magazines. A swarm paused mid-flight. I nodded when the road allowed and kept my eyes forward. His face nagged at me like a melody you can't place. At the last light before the highway, red held us. The windshield turned the world into twins. The dripping signal, 2 blurred men in a moving box, the small face on glossy paper. He tilted the photo so I could see it clearly. The dimple deepened beneath rain freckles. Air thinned in my chest. "You have kids?" he asked, carefully, as if the answer might burn him. "I had a daughter," I said. The words set themselves down like a candle on stone. "I'm sorry," he whispered. When the light changed, the car leapt. The hospital sign appeared blue against the storm, an arrow promising relief to people who haven't yet paid for it. I should have felt grateful. Instead, that white seam near his jaw tugged at my vision, a loose thread begging to be pulled. With the rain easing, the city quieted, and into that quiet slipped the old sound. Tires, breath, and a street folding inward like paper. "Almost there," I said. I wasn't sure whether I meant the hospital or the truth. He bowed his head and pressed the photo to his lips as if prayer could climb ink. "Thank you," he murmured. "I won't forget." I tightened my grip until my knuckles bleached. The entrance bloomed ahead, light smeared into halos by glass. Somewhere inside, a child balanced on the thin line between now and never. Beside me sat a man the night was slowly, piece by piece, returning to me. Behind it all, in a room painted a color once called morning, a folded blanket waited on a table for an ending I had postponed. The sound in my head kept going. But for the first time in 3 years, it changed key. The hospital lights had the kind of brightness that makes you doubt the existence of night. They turned everything sterile, unreal, like a dream refusing to end. As soon as we pushed through the glass doors, nurses rushed forward, and the man beside me almost collapsed from exhaustion. He shouted his daughter's name, Aya, and they guided him toward a waiting area where panic goes to hide behind paperwork. I stayed near the entrance, dripping rainwater onto the tiles. My reflection in the glass looked hollow, as if half of me hadn't made it this far. Through the blur, I saw his face again under fluorescent light, pale, frightened, too human. And there it was, the thin scar cutting along his jaw, catching the white light like a signature written in flesh. That mark had stared back at me once before, from a photograph inside a police report. The driver they never found. The blurred image of a man glancing over his shoulder, headlights reflecting in the side mirror. They said it wasn't enough to identify him. They said accidents happen, but accidents don't beg for help in the middle of the night. I turned away from the memory. Behind me, a nurse spoke quickly into a phone. She's critical. Type O negative. We need confirmation now. Her words fell like drops into my chest. The man looked up, eyes wide with helplessness. He caught my gaze as if clinging to it. You said your type's O negative, right? He asked. I nodded. They said she doesn't have much time. His voice cracked at the edges. For a second, I saw myself in him. 3 years ago, pleading with strangers who looked away. Back then, I thought the world owed me compassion. Now I knew better. The world owed no one anything. Still, I followed him down the hallway because walking away felt like letting the past win twice. The doctor met us near the donor room. His words were practical, sharp, stripped of comfort. We need to start immediately. Her vitals are dropping. I signed the form without reading. The pen felt heavier than it should have, as if the ink carried history. They led me to a chair beside the sterile table. A nurse tied the band around my arm, her voice gentle. You're doing a good thing. If only she knew. While the blood flowed, I stared at the clock ticking above the door. Each second sounded like tires against wet asphalt. My pulse tried to match it, but couldn't. Across the hall, through a small window, I saw him sitting alone, head in his hands. For a long time, I wanted to hate that posture, the same collapse I'd known too well. But hate is complicated. It feeds on truth. And truth has a habit of arriving slowly, step by step, until it's standing right behind you. When the transfusion finished, the nurse smiled faintly. You might feel lightheaded. Rest here a bit. She left, leaving only the hum of machines and my thoughts. I sat still, letting the emptiness in me refill with irony. The man who took my child's future was now depending on me to save his. He came in quietly a few minutes later. They said she's stable for now, he whispered. His eyes glistened, the kind of tears people mistake for redemption. I don't know how to thank you. I didn't answer. Gratitude wasn't what I wanted. Not yet. He rubbed his hands together, searching for warmth or words. I used to live near Willow Street, he said suddenly. The name struck like a hammer. Willow Street, the road where the crash happened. He kept talking, unaware of the silence spreading inside me. It was years ago. I don't drive anymore. Can't. Every time I see headlights behind me, I freeze. I watched the scar tremble as he spoke. His confession floated there, unfinished, waiting for forgiveness he hadn't earned. My fingers curled against the armrest. The image of a small pink shoe flashed behind my eyes, the one I'd held when they covered her body. He sighed and looked at the floor. You ever lose someone you can't stop thinking about? He asked softly. I looked straight at him. Every day, I said. Our eyes met for the first time with no storm between us. He must have felt something then, a flicker of recognition trying to surface. But the nurse interrupted, calling his name, saying the doctor needed him. He stood, grateful for the distraction. Thank you again, he said, and hurried down the hall. I sat there alone, the chair cold beneath me, the blood inside me now part of a stranger's child. Outside the window, dawn struggled through the clouds. The rain had stopped, but the street below still glistened with its memory. I touched the spot on my arm where the needle had been. The skin was red, tender, alive. The irony wasn't lost on me. Life always finds its way through pain, even when it shouldn't. When I finally left the hospital, the world smelled of wet concrete and beginnings I didn't ask for. My car waited under the dim orange light, droplets racing down the windshield. I sat inside, staring at my reflection until the fog on the glass turned it into a stranger's face. For the first time since that night, I didn't feel empty. I felt something colder, sharper, more deliberate. I now knew the name of the man who took everything from me. and fate had just handed him back. Morning arrived like a hesitant apology, seeping through the hospital's tinted windows and turning corridors a pale gold. When the room stopped tilting, I signed a discharge form and stepped into the waiting area. He was there, coat on a plastic chair, head bowed, a half-formed prayer caught between his fingers. In this light, details sharpened. The narrow scar, the careful way he moved his jaw, a slight tremor in his knee, as if the body remembered an impact the mind kept erasing. The face from the sketch had always looked like a rumor. In daylight it turned solid. A doctor approached with the careful tone used when truth and mercy must be braided together. "She's stable," he told him. "The transfusion bought time. We'll scan again in a few hours." Relief buckled the man. He thanked everyone. The doctor, the nurse, me last of all. He offered his name as if it explained anything. "I'm Daniel." It landed inside a memory I wished I'd misfiled. An officer noting a witness who heard someone at a gas station call the driver Dan. I swallowed the shard rising in my throat. "I'm Michael," I said, using the middle name reserved for forms that don't deserve the truth. He repeated it, then folded his daughter's photo and slid it into his wallet. "I don't know how to repay you," he said. "Be there when she wakes." Through the window, the storm had washed the city clean of yesterday. When the doctor excused him to the cafeteria, he hesitated. "Come with me? I owe you breakfast." I wanted distance. I wanted a map back to the person I was before tires bit water and a small hand loosened in mine. "Fine," I said and followed him. We ordered muted food, toast, eggs, coffee. He ate the way men do when they fear if they stop, their thoughts will eat them instead. Between sips, he offered the kind of confession people give to strangers after a night like this, because truth feels safer when it has no address. "I used to drive delivery at night," he said. "Long shifts, rain, shortcuts. After that winter, I moved, changed jobs, sold the car." My fork paused. Winter, shortcut, sound. His words fit the outline of the night that erased me. I watched his mouth shape an apology to no one and wondered whether remorse ages into humility or hardens into armor renamed character. "Accidents happen," he said, too softly for the phrase to be anything but a bruise. "But running changes a man." "Why come to me?" I asked. "I did knock on other doors," he said. "But when you opened yours, I felt like I'd reached the right place. I could have ended it then, spoken my true name, given the date, described the shoes I keep in a drawer like a relic. But timing is a blade. Used wrong, it cuts the wielder." Instead, I asked about Aya. He showed a video. The girl in a park, spinning until the world blurred, laughing at gravity. After a few seconds, he snapped the phone shut as if joy were dangerous currency here. An hour later, the doctor suggested he go home, shower, bring fresh clothes. "We'll call if anything changes." Daniel flinched at changes. He looked at me. "Would you come with me? I'm useless alone." I nodded. We walked to the garage where cars sat in quiet rows. He led me to a tired sedan with a dashboard crack like a fault line. When he turned the key, the engine coughed and steadied. Halfway down the ramp, daylight cut across his face. The scar flashed white. A sound inside me aligned with it. The remembered hiss, the breath, the swerve. My hands cooled. I could see it again. A car like this muscling through rain, a mirror catching a face divided by that seam. "Left on Willow?" I asked, because I needed to hear the street out loud. He blinked. "You know the shortcut." We merged into traffic. Storefronts drifted by wearing the same names they'd worn the night my life was repainted. When we turned onto Willow, the pavement remembered. Puddles held their old places where the city forgot to fix what mattered. He slowed. "I don't usually drive this way." "Why not?" "Because this street knows me." He tried to laugh, then strangled it. We passed the crosswalk. My throat tightened. I felt the ghost weight of a small backpack tug the air. A wind chime on a porch rang once, twice, 3 times. He adjusted the mirror, and the scar shone like a confession stepping into sun. "Daniel," I said, "how did you get that mark?" He kept his eyes forward. "Glass," he said. "A long time ago. A night I don't talk about." We drove the rest in silence. At his building, he parked with care, as if afraid to bruise the curb. He stared through the windshield. When he finally turned, his voice had been sanded down to truth. "If I tell you something," he said, "will you stay until I finish?" "Yes," I said, and meant it. He swallowed. Morning lifted every flaw on his face until it looked like a map. There was a winter, he began, when I made a choice that has been choosing me ever since. He didn't start the engine right away. The key hung between us, waiting, the way a question waits for courage. Outside, the neighborhood shimmered with morning drizzle, gardens washed clean, curtains shifting like slow breathing. I counted his heartbeats in the silence. Go on, I said. Tell me about that winter. Daniel's fingers tapped the wheel. I'd been on shift 16 hours. A storm worse than last night. Deliveries backed up, boss yelling. I shouldn't have been driving. But bills, he exhaled, long and hollow. On Willow, a shape ran out. I swerved, thought I missed it. Then the sound, something I still hear when it rains. He rubbed his scar. The same rhythm I'd used to scrub at guilt that wasn't mine. I stopped farther down, he whispered. Got out, looked back. Headlights in water. I froze. A car turned the corner behind me, and he swallowed. I ran. He looked at me, expecting judgment. I gave him silence instead. I told myself maybe it was a dog, he said. Then the news said a child. I moved, sold everything. I've been paying for it every day. He waited for me to speak. I kept my eyes on the windshield, where the rain began again, thin and deliberate. I didn't trust my voice. When he turned the key, the engine caught softly. We drove in the kind of quiet that bruises. Each turn was another page from the police report, now playing in reverse. Willow, 5th, the gas station corner, where witnesses remembered a dented bumper and a trembling man. He talked, not to me but to the ghosts he'd been carrying. After that night, I couldn't look at myself. Got this scar fixing the car. Glass cracked when I tried to remove the windshield. I thought if I made it look new, the memory would change. He laughed once dry. It didn't. We passed the elementary school. A playground glistened with puddles. A single swing moved in wind, back and forth, back and forth. I looked away. At a red light, he said, You ever believe in second chances? Depends who's asking. He nodded, misunderstanding. Aya, she's the reason I'm still breathing. She saved me without knowing. When she was born, I thought maybe the universe forgave me. His voice thinned. But seeing you last night, how quick you helped, it felt like another sign. Like people can still be good. I almost laughed, but it would have sounded like breaking glass. He parked outside a squat brick building with ivy curling around the door. You can come in if you want coffee. Inside smelled of dust and citrus cleaner. Photos lined the hallway. Aya at different ages, and a woman with tired eyes. His late wife, judging by the urn on the shelf. I followed him to the kitchen. He poured coffee with hands that didn't stop trembling. You ever lose someone? He asked again. I did, I said. What helped you keep going? Nothing. He studied me over the rim of his cup. That's honest. I wanted to tell him everything. The sirens, the small blanket, the years of silence. But confession is currency, and I wasn't ready to spend mine yet. He disappeared into a side room and returned with a box. These are her drawings. I keep them here in case. He stopped, unable to finish. A paper butterfly slipped from the stack and landed near my shoe. I picked it up. On its wing, a faint fingerprint smudged in red paint, the same shade as the ribbon my daughter used to wear. He smiled weakly. Aya likes butterflies. Says they prove change can be beautiful. I set it gently on the table. Change usually hurts first. He didn't notice the tremor in my voice. I should head back to the hospital soon. Will you come? Of course, I said. We finish what we start. He locked the door, and we walked into the gray daylight. I let him drive this time. The scar on his jaw caught the sun like a blade each time he turned his head. He spoke of hope. I listened for justice disguised as coincidence. As the hospital came into view, I touched the pocket where the folded photo of my daughter lived. The edges had softened over years of handling, but her smile still cut sharp. In that moment, I understood something simple and terrible. Fate wasn't handing me closure. It was handing me a mirror. And what I chose to do next would decide whether I finally stopped hearing the sound or made someone else hear it forever. The drive back to the hospital felt shorter, though the distance hadn't changed. Maybe time itself was folding in, forcing the present to collide with the past. Rain misted over the windshield, a fine silver veil that blurred the world just enough to make it look like memory. Daniel hummed something under his breath, a tune without melody, the kind a man uses to keep from falling apart. He parked crookedly near the entrance, didn't even bother locking the doors, and rushed ahead through the sliding glass panels. I followed at a slower pace, letting the air thicken around me. Hospitals have their own temperature, not hot or cold, just suspended, as if grief itself powered the ventilation. Inside, everything smelled of disinfectant and second chances. A nurse spotted Daniel and guided him toward pediatrics. His steps faltered once, then gathered speed again. I trailed him, my shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. The corridor lights hummed overhead, pale and endless. When we reached Aya's room, I stayed in the doorway. Machines blinked beside a small bed. Tubes whispered, oxygen hissed. The girl was even smaller than in the photograph. Too still, her hair gathered in uneven strands, her skin the color of clouds before rain. Daniel fell to his knees beside the bed, whispering her name like a prayer stitched through tears. I couldn't move. Every heartbeat pushed against the memory of another hospital room years ago. Same white walls, same helpless beeping, only a different name echoing between them. My daughter had lain just as still, her tiny hand already cooling in mine. I had begged for one more hour, one more miracle. None came. The nurse approached with quiet efficiency. Her levels are improving. The transfusion helped. She glanced at me and smiled faintly. You saved her. I nodded but said nothing. The word saved hung heavy, like irony pretending to be mercy. Daniel stood and wiped his face. She's going to make it, he said, half laughing, half sobbing. Because of you. I forced a smile, but inside something shifted, like a hinge creaking open after years of rust. I didn't feel proud or relieved. I felt the calm that comes right before a storm decides what to destroy next. He asked if I wanted to meet her when she woke. The question caught me off guard. She should see the man who gave her another chance, he said. She'd want to thank you. I looked through the glass again. Her chest rose and fell softly beneath the blanket, each breath a fragile rhythm. Maybe later, I said. He nodded, grateful anyway. At least stay for a while. I'll grab coffee. My head spinning. When he left, I stepped into the room. The steady beep of the monitor filled the silence, an artificial heartbeat marking borrowed time. I sat beside her bed, staring at her small hand resting on the sheet. There was a faint bruise near the foreline, the same spot where I used to tickle my daughter's palm until she laughed. The doctor entered quietly. You're the donor? Yes. She's a lucky girl, he said. You've given her family a gift most people never get. I almost laughed at that. If he only knew how twisted the truth was, how the blood that saved her carried the story of the life her father had taken. But I said nothing. Doctors deal in facts, not ghosts. When he left, I stood and approached the window. The city stretched below, wet and trembling. Somewhere out there, on that same street, was the mark on the pavement they never cleaned properly. Even after all these years, I could still trace it in my mind. The skid, the pool of water, the shadow where my life cracked open. Behind me, Aya stirred. Her eyes fluttered, then opened. She blinked slowly, confused but curious. Where's my dad? She whispered. He'll be right back, I said softly. Her gaze moved to the bandage on my arm. You helped me. I nodded. A little. She smiled, weak but sincere. Thank you. That smile, innocent, undeserving of punishment, cut through every wall I'd built. She looked nothing like my daughter, yet somehow everything about her felt familiar. The trust, the fragile warmth. For a moment, vengeance seemed like a foreign language I'd forgotten how to speak. Daniel returned, 2 cups in hand, and froze when he saw her awake. Aya, he cried, rushing forward. She reached for him, her thin arms wrapping around his neck. The sound he made was half joy, half apology. I looked away, afraid the scene might soften something I needed to keep sharp. She wanted to thank you, he said over his shoulder. You're her hero now. I shook my head. No heroes here, Daniel. Just survivors. He frowned slightly, but let it pass. When the nurse reminded him visiting hours were ending, he refused to leave until Aya drifted back to sleep. Then he turned to me again, eyes raw but grateful. You gave me back my world, he said. I'll never forget this. I followed him out into the hall, our footsteps echoing down the sterile corridor. His words clung to me long after he left. I'll never forget this. Good, I thought. That's exactly the point. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the sky pale and open. I stood by my car, the keys heavy in my hand. Somewhere above, a helicopter hummed, carrying someone else's emergency through the clouds. I leaned against the door, feeling the weight of the day press into my chest. My plan had started to change shape. I didn't know yet whether I wanted to forgive him or destroy him. Maybe both. Maybe one required the other. But one thing was certain, the story wasn't over. It had only just begun to breathe again. Night thinned across the hospital like a blanket washed too many times. Familiar, never warm. Aya slept, her breath a small metronome. Daniel stood with his palm on the glass, as if touch could anchor time. When a nurse suggested the family room, he asked me to come. We walked a dim corridor where the lights hummed like insects in jars. 2 couches, a rattling vending machine, a window that framed a wet parking lot. That was the room. Daniel sat, elbows on knees, and stared into the dark. The silence between us felt dense, like a door waiting for one last hinge. "I think you deserve to know," he said. "You saved her, and I've been a stranger who avoids mirrors." His fingers found the thin seam along his jaw. I was 28, driving nights, convinced I could outwork weather and luck. One winter storm I took Willow, everyone did. Rain turned the street into glass. Headlights came around the corner. I veered. A shape stepped where no shape should. I braked too late. The wipers kept moving, pretending the sky was fixable. I pulled forward, got out, heard voices coming, saw my lights in a puddle, red and white making a color I don't have a name for. My hands went. He didn't look at me. I told myself I'd go back after I calmed down. I didn't. The news said a little girl didn't make it home. I moved apartments, sold the car, learned routes that never crossed Willow. He gave a small, bitter laugh. The scar? From replacing the windshield. It shattered on me like a judgment. New glass didn't change the view. I knew the weight on his shoulders. I carried its twin. He wasn't asking for absolution. He was trying to stop carrying the story alone. "I started visiting the crosswalk after midnight," he said. Hands in pockets, counting shadows, as if precision could rewrite anything. "I brought flowers once. The wind took them before I could learn how to set them down." He rubbed his eyes. "When Aya was born, I promised to tell her someday. Not to be praised, so honesty could live in our house. I wanted her to see who not to become, even if that person was me." He finally met my gaze. "I don't know why I knocked on your door. There were other houses. But when you opened it, I felt like I'd found a landmark I lost years ago. Something in me believed you would help." I kept my face still. The lamp threw a narrow halo over his scar. Deep inside, an old engine turned over and caught. "You ever think about turning yourself in?" I asked. "Every week. I wrote a letter once. The time, the street, the sound of rain on the hood. I sealed it and kept it for 2 years. When my wife got sick, I told myself I couldn't leave Aya. After she passed, I told myself I couldn't take her father from her. I've collected noble-sounding lies." The vending machine rattled as it swallowed my coin. I handed him a bottle of water. He flinched at the cold, then held it like a promise he didn't trust. "What would you say," I asked, "if the person you hurt sat in front of you?" He blinked at the shape of that thought. "I'd say I'm sorry in a way that doesn't expect anything back. I wake up to it, sleep with it. I know sorry rebuilds nothing, but it's the only honest brick I have. I watch Aya breathe and pray for a way to pay without taking myself from her. If there's more to carry, I'll carry it." His voice frayed, then steadied. The parking lot flickered when a car alarm tested its lungs and went quiet. Beyond our door, the hallway sighed and fell still. I realized my hands were clenched. I opened them and felt blood return like a tide. "You should rest," I said. "Not tonight." "Then sit," I told him, "and let the truth finish what it started." We watched the sky turn a darker blue. Somewhere in pediatrics, a machine agreed with time. I pictured Aya waking to a ceiling she might learn to trust, and another ceiling from another year that taught me only endings. A nurse came to say Aya was stable enough for brief visits in the morning. Daniel thanked her with a voice that remembered how to stand. He turned back to me. "Whatever you need from me," he said. "If repayment is possible, I'm listening." I stood, the chair sighing to be free of decisions. "There will be a conversation," I said. "Not tonight. Not here. Soon." We stepped into the corridor. Fluorescents flared and settled. Coffee and damp coats scented the air. Daniel walked ahead, shoulders squared, as if bracing for weather that might finally be honest. I followed, and each footstep sounded like a gavel falling very softly, again and again, toward a verdict I could almost name. Morning returned without apology, bleeding through blinds that hadn't been closed. I hadn't slept. The chair in the waiting room held the shape of me like a mold. Daniel dozed upright on the couch, one arm across his chest, the other limp at his side. His phone buzzed twice before he stirred. "Doctor," he mumbled, then blinked awake. "Yeah, we'll come right down." He turned to me, voice frayed but hopeful. "They're taking her off monitors today. Looks like she's turning a corner." For a heartbeat, I wanted to be glad for him. Then the memory of another morning, another doctor, folded over the thought and crushed it flat. We walked to the elevator. The air inside smelled faintly of bleach and old fear. Each floor chime sounded like a countdown. When the doors opened, the pediatric wing was alive again, nurses moving briskly, machines humming with obedience. Aya's room glowed in pale sunlight. She sat up this time, a coloring book open on her lap. When she saw her father, her whole face rearranged into light. "Daddy," she said, voice raspy but sure. He dropped to his knees beside her, overwhelmed by the miracle of simple words. I stood near the doorway. She looked at me, uncertain at first, then smiled. "You're the man who helped, right?" I nodded. "Just in the right place at the right time." Her small fingers traced the page, careful not to press too hard on the 4. "Daddy said you're a hero." I almost laughed. "Heroes make better choices than I do." Daniel turned, eyes shining with something between gratitude and shame. "You did more than you know," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "or maybe not yet." He didn't understand, and that was fine. The truth wasn't ready for him. It was still sharpening. A nurse entered, cheerful and unaware of the ghosts hovering in the room. "Good news. We can schedule her discharge in 2 days if things stay steady." Daniel exhaled like he'd been underwater. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you so much." When the nurse left, he turned to me. "I don't even know where to start. How do you thank someone for this?" "You can start," I said quietly, "by telling the truth to the right people." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Accidents don't bury themselves forever." His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked toward Aya, who was humming softly, her voice thin as a thread. "Not here," he said. "Fine. Tonight." That evening, after visiting hours ended, we found an empty chapel on the first floor, a small square of quiet beneath fluorescent hum. Candles lined one wall, most unlit. Daniel sat in the front pew, hands pressed together though no prayer formed. "I told you last night everything," he said. "You think I should go to the police now? After 3 years? What does that fix?" "It fixes the silence," I said. "And silence is what keeps ghosts alive." He looked at me. "You talk like you've lived it." "I have." "Someone you lost?" I let the pause stretch until he couldn't bear it. "You already know who." He blinked. "I don't." "My daughter," I said. "She was the one on Willow Street. You were the driver." The color drained from his face as if the words themselves pulled it out. For a long second, he didn't breathe. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Then he whispered, "Oh God." I didn't move. "You remember now." He stood, stumbling back a step, palms out. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "You knew enough to run." His back hit the pew behind him. "If I could trade places, I would." "That's the thing about choices," I said. "They never trade evenly." He covered his face, shaking. "You could have let her die," he said through his hands. "Why didn't you?" "Because that would have ended it. I want you to live with it." Tears leaked between his fingers. The chapel lights flickered, and for a moment I saw both of us reflected in the glass pane of the prayer wall. 2 men bound by a single moment neither could undo. "I'll confess," he said finally, voice hollow. "Tomorrow. I'll tell them everything." I stepped closer until he could see the truth in my eyes. "Make sure you do," I said. "Because if you don't, the world has more ways than one to make you remember." He nodded, trembling, and sank back onto the bench. I left him there, surrounded by the silence he'd built for himself. Outside, night breathed over the parking lot. The city lights shimmered in puddles, and somewhere far off a siren began to rise, a sound I knew too well. For the first time, it didn't make me flinch. I didn't sleep that night. Sleep requires peace, and peace was something I'd traded long ago. The storm outside had turned into a slow drizzle, the kind that never really stops, just lingers, like guilt. By morning, I was sitting in the hospital's parking lot, watching water run along the edges of the pavement. Daniel had promised to confess, but promises made under pressure tend to melt with the daylight. I needed to see if he would keep his word. When I walked inside, The receptionist greeted me with polite recognition. Aya's room was already busy. Nurses removing tubes, folding blankets, preparing for discharge. She looked better, almost radiant, coloring in a book with small, steady hands. Daniel was beside her, tying her shoes, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Morning," he said when he noticed me. "She's going home today." "Already?" He nodded. "The doctor said she's strong. Like her mother." He hesitated, then added, "I wanted to thank you once more, before we leave." I watched him carefully. His eyes were swollen, red from tears, or maybe from rehearsing the truth he'd promised to tell. "I'll come with you," I said. "To the station." The air froze between us. He looked away. "I thought about it," he murmured. "But what's the point? The police closed that case years ago. They won't listen." "You mean they won't listen, or you're afraid they might?" His jaw tightened. Aya glanced up at us, sensing something she couldn't name. "Daddy," she whispered. "It's nothing, sweetheart." He smiled for her, but his hands trembled as he tied the knot. I waited until the nurse left, then stepped closer. "You made a promise, Daniel." He turned sharply, anger breaking through the calm. "You think I don't live it every day? You think I sleep? I see her face every time I close my eyes. Your daughter, my sin, whatever you want to call it, it's already my prison. And yet you're still free," I said quietly. "She's not." His breath caught. For a moment I thought he might strike me. But instead, he lowered his voice. "I'm not the only one who lost something that night," he said. "You think revenge will bring her back? It won't. I've tried to make amends with my own life, with my daughter, with every decent thing I've done since then. But you've let hate raise you instead of her memory." The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I felt my pulse in my throat. Aya's laughter from the hallway cracked through the tension like sunlight through clouds. Daniel followed the sound, stepping past me, and I knew I couldn't stop him. Not yet. I walked outside to breathe. The sky was pale, heavy with unshed rain. For 3 years I'd wanted nothing but this moment. The confrontation, the confession, the justice no court had delivered. And now, standing there, I couldn't tell which of us deserved mercy less. A familiar voice pulled me back. "Mr. Harris?" It was the detective, gray hair, old case folder in hand. I'd called him anonymously 2 nights ago, leaving just enough clues to stir memory. "We reopened the Willow file," he said. "You said you had information?" I nodded. "The man you're looking for is inside." The detective's eyes narrowed. "You're sure?" "Completely." He gave a short nod and walked past me, 2 officers trailing behind. Through the glass doors, I saw them approach Daniel at the counter. He froze when they said his name. Aya looked up, confused. He reached for her hand, then stopped. The detective gestured gently, his tone calm but final. Daniel turned once, toward me. No hatred, no panic, just understanding. A silent acknowledgement passed between us. The truth had finally arrived. Minutes later, the doors closed behind him, leaving Aya with a nurse and a stuffed toy clutched to her chest. She didn't cry. She just stared at the spot where her father had stood. I walked to the bench outside and sat, the rain finally breaking open. My hands shook, not from triumph, but from the hollow echo left when vengeance is finished. The detective joined me after a while. "We'll verify everything. There's evidence we missed back then, witnesses, records. If what you said checks out, this might finally close the case." "Will it?" I asked. "Or will it just file it away under justice?" He didn't answer. He just nodded, the kind of nod that belongs to men who've seen too many endings that don't feel like closure. When he left, I looked up at the hospital window. Aya was watching me, her hand pressed against the glass, small and unknowing. For a second, I thought about waving, but I couldn't. Her eyes reminded me too much of the ones I'd lost. The siren of the police car rose and fell as it carried Daniel away. And though the sound should have brought relief, it didn't. It just replaced one kind of silence with another. I stayed there long after they were gone, letting the rain wash the dust from my shoes, and wondering whether justice had come too late, or whether it had come exactly on time. The rain thinned to mist, then to nothing, leaving the hospital lot smelling like metal and wet leaves. The cruiser that took Daniel had merged into the city's bloodstream, siren a fading pulse. I sat beneath the overhang until my shirt dried in patches, until the automatic doors sighed open and closed enough times to feel like a metronome for other people's emergencies. Somewhere above me, Aya was learning the shape of absence. I remembered that lesson too well. Detective Morel called at noon. He's talking, he said. Says he wants to put everything in order. Your tip lined up with a witness and a windshield receipt on 12th. We'll send the case to the DA. Good, I said, and the word tasted like iron. Necessary, not nourishing. I didn't go home. Home was a museum I hadn't curated. I walked the blocks until dusk, then found Aya in the playroom. She spotted me through the glass and lifted her hand. Small, steady. I opened the door. You're the neighbor from last night, she said. They said my dad had to answer questions. He did, I said. And he will. She studied me with the seriousness children use when they sense adults are moving the furniture of truth. Is he in trouble? He's in a place where people listen carefully, I said. Sometimes that's how things start to get fixed. She nodded like she wanted to believe it. The nurse said I can go home tomorrow, she added, then paused. But where is home if Dad isn't there? There are questions you can only hold, not answer. Wherever someone tells you the truth and stays, I said. That can be a home for a while. She surprised me. Thank you for helping him do the brave thing. Something inside me shifted, like a locked joint sliding, pain first, relief second. Maybe we helped each other, I said. That night, I drove to Willow. I parked a block away and walked the last stretch in thin cold. The crosswalk waited under a tired street lamp, paint ghosted by weather. The curb still carried a faint scar where a bumper once learned the cost of haste. I stood at the edge and closed my eyes. The old sound rose, the breath, the slide, the world splitting. I let it come. Grief, like rain, loses interest if you stop arguing with it. When I opened my eyes, an envelope lay on the asphalt, pinned by a small stone. I recognized hospital stationery. Inside was a single page, Daniel's handwriting careful, deliberate. He wrote that he had told the detectives everything. The route, the storm, the moment he ran. He wrote that he didn't expect forgiveness, that he would accept whatever came. Meeting me felt like the end of a long hallway where doors had finally decided to be honest. At the bottom, a postscript. Please make sure Aya knows I didn't disappear. Tell her I finally learned how to stay. I stood with the letter until my hands cooled. In another pocket, I kept the small photo of my daughter, edges softened by years of fingerprints. For the first time, I set the two side by side, and the world didn't tilt. 2 lives, a hinge, and the ache that kept them attached. By morning, there was a message from the detective. No bail, arraignment tomorrow. We'll need your statement, he said. It matters. I went in and gave it. Dates, rain, distances you can measure with a map and never really know. I didn't embroider the parts grief is good at decorating. I kept to what the night had done and what I had chosen after. When it was over, Morel set down his pen. You sure about the part where you drove him here? I'm sure, I said. That's a kind of courage I don't see much. It didn't feel like courage, I told him. It felt like finishing a sentence that started without me. Outside, the day was bright in that winter way where light is a color and warmth a rumor. I walked past a school where children burst from a door like confetti. Their noise hit me and didn't hurt. I took it as a weather report from a place I might be allowed to visit again. Late afternoon, a nurse handed me a sealed envelope at the desk. From Aya, she said. Inside was a drawing. 3 stick figures beneath a fat-limbed tree. One had a scar on his cheek, a tiny line she must have added because she knows her father's face by heart. Another held a small rectangle the color of evening. My car, I think, or a door. Above us, she had written, in round letters, thank you for telling the truth. I pressed the paper flat with my palm. The sound that never stopped shifted once more, softer now, something like wheels rolling over dry ground. I didn't call it forgiveness. Not yet. But it was movement, and that was enough to make the air feel almost breathable again. The courthouse smelled of paper, dust, and coffee left too long on a hot plate. I stood at the back, a spectator in the case that had rewritten both of our lives. Daniel sat in the defendant's chair, hands clasped, eyes lowered. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a man finally stripped of excuses. The judge read through the charges slowly, as if words could weigh the years we'd both lost. I didn't expect satisfaction, and I didn't find any. Justice, when it finally comes, feels too quiet. It doesn't roar, it exhales. When the gavel fell, Daniel nodded once. He didn't look at me, not until the bailiff turned him toward the door. Then, for a heartbeat, his gaze met mine, steady, not pleading. In it I saw something unexpected, relief. He'd found an ending, even if it was inside four walls. Outside, the air was sharp and bright. I walked until the courthouse disappeared behind trees that hadn't yet lost their leaves. For the first time in years, the sound of tires on wet streets didn't tighten my chest. The echo had changed key again, no longer the scream of memory, just a faint rhythm of something closing. That evening I drove back to Willow Street. The sun was low, turning puddles into mirrors. I parked near the same curb and stepped out. The crosswalk looked almost new. The city had repainted it since last winter. I stood there anyway, the same spot, hands in pockets. A car slowed nearby, the driver nodding politely before passing. The sound of wheels on damp asphalt rolled through the quiet. I waited for pain, but none came. Only stillness. In the distance, a knock echoed faintly. Someone's door, someone else's emergency, the ordinary noise of life continuing. It startled me how ordinary it sounded. Once, a knock had ended my world. Now it simply meant someone was home. My phone buzzed. A message from the nurse. Aya asked if she can send you a picture. I texted back, of course. Minutes later, it arrived. A photo of a drawing taped to her hospital wall. A sun, two houses, and a single line between them labeled truth. Beneath it, she'd written, for both of my fathers. I didn't realize I was crying until the paper in my hand blurred. I sat in the car and let it happen. Not the broken sobs of those first months, but something quieter, steadier. A release. As twilight fell, I whispered her name, my daughter's, not Aya's. And for the first time it didn't echo back as an accusation. Just an answer. I started the engine. The radio came alive mid-song, static clearing into melody. The city lights blinked awake one by one. For years, I thought justice meant taking something from someone else. Now I understood. It meant returning what was stolen. Silence, peace, breath. At the intersection, the light turned green. I drove forward, past the spot where everything had stopped. Behind me, the street faded into the distance, washed clean by rain and time. Ahead, the world waited, unfixed, imperfect, but still moving. And for the first time since that night, I followed.